Alan Colmes with us another 27 minutes or so, and I'm going to let Alan ask me some questions, too, because he's been asking me, what I think of Glenn Beck and stuff during the break, so we'll do that all live here on air. But Alan, let's get down to brass tacks on the subject of New World Order world government. 15, 16 years ago, I would read UN documents calling for a global government, calling for global one-child policies, Trilateral Commission calling for it. I would talk about it. I would be called a kook, written up in federal reports as dangerous. Now, I have in my hand, we're also live on the internet on TV, we can do it. New York Times, October 26, 2009, Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the UN. He calls for global government structure, global governance. In the article, those are quotes, and says the carbon tax will finance the global government. So let me ask Alan Colmes. We now have Limbaugh admitting world government after denying it for decades. We now have Glenn Beck coming along talking about it. So it's kind of like a right-wing issue now. And then meanwhile, the Southern Poverty Law Center, ADL, CBS News, I've got all these articles right here, Salon, Media Matters, all the George Soros publications are saying I am basically this dangerous liar who is lying to everyone and saying world government is here. Alan Colmes, because any given day I can go to Google and type in New World Order, world government, and get hundreds of articles in mainstream news announcing world government, saying it's good. So, Alan Colmes, I'm asking you, how is the mainstream media going to have this, where they say there is no world government, no move towards global government, but at the same time admit that there's a world government? How do they admit there's a world government, but then separately if you talk about it and say you don't want it?
They is admitting there's a world government. As far as Moon is concerned, he runs the UN. I don't know exactly what he said about world government. You have people like Beck and you have Limbaugh who have such contempt for Obama that they're going to say, oh, my God, look at this Marxist, look at this horrible left-wing totalitarian. He wants to take over the world and scare people and make them believe that somehow with a liberal lefty guy in the government who is, they think in some cases, not the people I mentioned, but some of their followers believe he was born in Kenya, wasn't even an American, and how dare this guy take over our government? They're going to run it. It's going to be a world government. It's fear-mongering. Regardless of what the UN says, Alex, we are a sovereign country. We're not in any danger of not becoming a sovereign country. I don't believe that the UN or any other world body will be taking over our government. Of course, we do have to have treaties with other countries, whether it's treaties on the environment, as you mentioned, whether it's whether it's economic issues. We live in a world community. It does take a village, and it takes a global village. So the idea that we can live isolated from the rest of the world, but in terms of sovereignty, nobody's taking over the United States.
Look at the World Trade Organization agreement. It has more power than our Congress does over trade. Let me read you what Ban Ki-moon said in the New York Times. A deal must include an equitable global governance structure. All countries must have a voice in how resources are deployed and managed. Well, that's a way of saying there, if you read the whole article, that the UN is going to decide where the resources go, and the countries will have their say.
Well, the UN doesn't have a right to unilaterally make that decision. Ban Ki-moon can say whatever he wants to say. He runs a global organization because he says it.
Hold on, but Alan, here's what I'm saying. You can't say people are kooks, because, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but just because they talk about global government when it's in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles. Here's the problem. I talked about how they were going to devalue the currency, bring in a global carbon tax, a monetary tax, set up this private global government around the IMF. That's now been announced. Here it is, Financial Times of London, and now for a world government. And they go on to say we need global government now, and it needs to be authoritarian to save the planet. Well,
you say they say it, Alex. There are always people who are going to say that. They're going to be kooks who say we need a world government. They're going to be crazy people who say we're going to take over the world. But the sovereign nations of the world are not going to submit to a world government. And
unless they're bankrupted from the inside by the very same banking institutions that are founding the world government.
Now you're into conspiracy theory stuff.
No, we are. Okay, did Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan Chase, are they making record profits right now? Did they come out smelling like a king, smelling like a 24-karat rose after the crisis last year?
Didn't they fold, or one of them folded? I don't know how they call that smelling like a rose. I don't see it that way at all.
No, J.P. Morgan, record profits, Goldman Sachs, record profits. They got to take over Bear Stearns, their competition.
What about all the companies that folded, that failed, that couldn't survive? That indeed institutions, Lehman Brothers, that you thought would be around forever.
It was a great consolidation. That's what the bigger, more powerful central banks wanted. It was Goldman Sachs that had their people all over the government in the key regulatory positions.
Look, if you are someone who worries about world government and you spend a lot of time, you will take everything you see as a sign that apocalypse is coming. I don't see it that way.
Oh, Alan, I'm not saying an apocalypse is coming.
Kind of apocalypse.
I have CBS News. I have ADL saying...
You can quote those media organizations.
No, hold on.
Bring you stories about those people who think this is happening, but we are and will continue to be a sovereign nation.
Alan, let me just finish this point to you. I'm here looking at the ADL. It says, rage grows in America, anti-government conspiracies... Anger on the fringes, Alex Jones, the conspiracy king. And then they
you
go
should
and...
be flattered, you're a king.
Yeah, but they say I'm bad because I talk about a global government run by private banks. That's what's being set up at the G20. They're actually proposing it.
Well, it's, again, you do wander into conspiracy theory territory. No country is going to give up their sovereignty to allow a global government. Do you really think the United States, under Obama or anybody else, is going to give up its sovereignty?
We'll still have the American flag out there flapping in the wind, but for all intents and purposes, just like the IMF and World Bank go in and take over third world countries. And
we're not a third world country. Why would the United States submit to a larger entity to run its sovereign?
Because we have corporate interests that want vertical integration and want to end our industrial society, to make the public more manageable, and to impose a forced planetary one-child policy. Have you read the textbook written by White House science czar John P. Holdren?
I didn't know he had czars. That's a media invention, that word. I know I didn't read his textbook, but I've read about him. And, again, I read how the people who, again, fear Obama and believe that he's a Marxist are somehow going to take over the world. This is conspiracy theory stuff, Alex.
Well, Alan, I think that's the left cover argument. And I know they have the right now playing the part of the party out of power. And so now they can talk about the New World Order and make it a discredited Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, right-wing situation. I think the fake neocon, warmongering, torture-loving criminals, with all of their insider deals with no-bid weapons contracts, they should love Obama. Continuing secret arrest, continuing indefinite.
You and I will probably agree. The idea of rendering, there was a story yesterday that there is a secret prison in Lithuania in a riding academy. The fact that this is going on, and this is where, when I hear conservatives talk about Obama being a radical liberal and Marxist and how, he's taken the country. No, he's not. He's doing, unfortunately, some of the same things I was critical of the Bush administration for doing.
At least you'll admit that. Most liberals will just say, no, he's not. And, in fact, he's intensifying a lot of this. So
the idea that we would render to other countries because we don't want to be seen as torturers, and also the idea that they want to give a pass to executives of previous administrations. There are people who believe, certainly on the left, that Bush and Cheney ought to be prosecuted, particularly Cheney, and that they've announced a hands-off policy. And that you have Eric Holder, who's going to go after the CIA, possibly, but they're not going to go after the actual torture memo writers and the attorneys who gave Bush and Cheney permission to violate the Constitution.
AlanColmes.com, syndicated radio host. Now you can tune in. What was that noise? We just lost his line. We've got him back. Alan, are you there?
Yeah, that was the government listening in, Alex.
No, it's probably the deteriorating infrastructure in this country falling apart.
Yes, it's part of the one world government taking over.
Alan, you don't have a microchip in your brain, do you?
Not that I know of.
Are you a reptoid?
Not that I know of.
Maybe you're just a voice hologram. Maybe I'm not even talking to Alan Colmes.
Alex, I've had surgery in my life. Who knows what they've implanted in me when I was under anesthesia?
Maybe you're just a computer program that Rupert Murdoch has there at the Fox studios.
And he may have done such a good job that I actually think I'm human.
But there's actually an argument for that Hannity could be a wind-up toy android. You just pull the string, and he has like 10 statements he makes.
I would have no knowledge of that.
You're a great American, Alan. Oh, my God. This is insane.
Well, let me ask you, because you highlighted this. We were talking about Glenn Beck. A lot of people compare the two of you. A lot of people believe that, your act and his in many ways are similar. So I would think there'd be some compatibility there.
No, because the establishment is creating this patriotoid, conspiracitoid counterfeit where Glenn Beck says he's fighting the New World Order, but then says we've got to launch new wars, and the Arabs have snuck nukes into the country. And right when Ron Paul had a chance to actually win during the primaries, Glenn Beck came out and said, this money bomb, that means blowing up people. He may be a terrorist. His listeners, we may need to use the army against them. I mean, these are almost exact quotes.